Welcome to the Maverick Podcast. I'm your host, Kathy Rose, and a big shout out to all the free spirits and independent thinkers. I really appreciate you, and I think you're going to really love what we talk about today. My guest is Alex Trenoweth. She is an astrologer, but she's also a teacher in the classroom in the UK, and she has written a book that is very important. We're going to talk about children from an astrological perspective, particularly with teaching and how the teachers could support the process of the kids if they knew a little bit about astrology. So welcome, Alex. Come on board.
Thank you very much. Hello.
Hello. So nice to meet you. And I've heard a lot about you through the years. I've always wanted to chat with you. And here we go.
Fabulous.
So let's talk about your book and talk about your process. First of all, you've been a teacher in the classroom for how many years now?
Most of my adult life, I've taught in some way or another. I taught sign language to deaf children for quite a few years in my university days. But an actual practical school teacher, I fully qualified in 2002. I did my teacher's training, but I did some teacher's training also in the US. So most of my adult life, I've been a teacher of some sort or another.
Which age range do you currently teach?
I teach them all, but I started off as a secondary school teacher for the UK that is 11 years old to 18-year-olds. I currently teach years 3-year-olds to 11-year-olds in what we call primary school. My favorite year group is the 11-year-olds. I love that Jupiter return age. Yes. But I also really enjoy the 9 and 10-year-olds. Those are it's the waning Jupiter square. I really love that too.
Okay, so let's dive into this. Let me first just say, for many years, I've been doing astrological consultations for almost 39 years now. And through that time, I really specialized in interpreting children's charts for parents. And I think it is essential, mindfully being able to interpret the child's chart to the parents and help the parent understand what the needs are for that child, not only their personality, but how they need to express their chart and how it may or may not be the same as the parent. Now, taking this into the classroom, though, and looking at these larger cycles to help children learn is what your book is about. It's called Growing Pains, Astrology and Adolescence. Why don't you, for those who are watching the video part, why don't you show the book? There we go. Growing Pains, Astrology and Adolescence, Alex Trenoweth. Order it. It's awesome. It's really, really good. And if you're not watching the video part of this, just go look it up on Google. You'll find it. What inspired you to do this? I'm sure it was the merging of your astrological brain and your teacher brain, seeing patterns, which is what we do, right?
Yeah, well, let me tell you this. Teaching is no place for wimps. It's a grueling career. It's nonstop. You never get a break from it. Even if you think, oh, summer holidays, you never get a break from teaching because you're planning or putting something together. And I only became a teacher because it was going to pay for astrology classes. Now, when I was a young child, my brother and I used to play school, and I was always a teacher. But in terms of practicalities, teachers training takes up a lot of time. And so it opened up in my life that I was able to do the training. And I really had a very short vision of how long I was going to be a teacher. And I nearly didn't make it. It was hard. There's all this emotional stuff that you don't expect. When you enter into a secondary school classroom, as I did, you are right back to being in high school, being picked on because you don't fit in. I know we're going to talk about being a maverick, but it's hard, and intellectually it's exhausting, physically exhausting. And I nearly didn't make it through the year, and my teacher's training year, that is. And I wasn't even allowed to use the name Alex. Alex is a nickname. It's not my legal name. But the head teacher had Googled Alex Trenoweth and found out that I was an astrologer, and I was at a Christian academy. And now I'd be able to argue my way around that. But at the time, I felt I was at the mercy of my head teacher, and I wanted to keep her sweet. So I agreed, okay, you don't have to call me Alex. You can call me by the other name. But yeah, I just struggled. Look, this is Saturn in Pisces. You see the books and how chaotic I can be. And I just thought, wow, I'm this is not for me. But one day I was teaching Macbeth. I even remember what I was teaching. And I looked out at my class and I thought, my God, you guys all have the same Jupiter sign for the most part. You all have the same Saturn sign. And this creates this astrological signature for the whole entire classroom, because we teach our children by year group. And so I did 12 years of observation. I followed in the path of Jean Piaget, who did the same thing in observing the behavior of children, in his case, his nieces and nephews, in my case, my students. And I just made a lot of notes about what worked, what didn't work, using astrological knowledge that I had. And then I came up with stages of development, which match the stages of development from any baby book. Choose your book. They match up, and so that's the basis of Growing Pains. Is
wonderful.
Prioritizing these stages of development, and it became really important during the pandemic too, to understand. Okay, you've got two siblings, brother and sister, or sisters, or whatever. And you can't expect them to learn the same way, even though they have the same parents. So astrology can help you teach the Jupiter in Aries compared to the Jupiter in Gemini, for example, and learning when to prioritize. I didn't say ignore, I said prioritize these stages of development can really help a parent put their energy in the right places.
So this is Maverick thinking, because it's thinking outside the box, it's innovative, it's personalized, and it honors the uniqueness of the child and the uniqueness of that group, and allows you to adapt to it. So let's talk about some of the dynamics here, on particularly what these children who are the same age would have in common. So one of the things we need to explain is that Jupiter spends about a year in a sign. So it goes around the entire zodiac in 12 years. So every 12 years, we get what's called a Jupiter return, Jupiter coming back to the natal position. So generally, when kids are all born in the same year, around the same time, that classroom is going to be filled with children, generally speaking, with the same Jupiter sign. The only time it would be different is if it changed signs in, somewhere in that year. So some of the kids may have one Jupiter sign, some another. But one of the things I look at with Jupiter is it's how we need to find reward, how we need to receive reward. And someone with Jupiter in Leo would seek reward very differently than someone with Jupiter in Pisces. And that's going to affect how you teach them. I noticed in your book, you talked about Jupiter in Aries, and you said, hey, with the Jupiter in Aries group, maybe you should bring in more competition. And I was cheering for that, because of course that would work. Who can solve this math problem the fastest?
Speed rounds.
Yes, speed rounds.
That's what they love. Mm-hmm. But the thing is about with Jupiter is, as much as we would like to, we can't give them their way all the time.
Yes.
So what Jupiter does, it helps us to understand their weaknesses too, particularly with the Saturn added in. So if you understand the Saturn and the Jupiter, you can actually help sort of bolster up their weaknesses, capitalize on their strengths, and help them through the more difficult things. You mentioned Jupiter in Leo. Well, we know that Leos are kind of the show person, but they might be taught alongside of Jupiter and Virgo students. Jupiter and Virgo learns completely differently to Jupiter and Leo.
That's a mouthful right there. Yes.
And I always found is that, if my seating plans, because I haven't taught in the US for a long time, but in the UK, when you're doing your seating plans, who sits next to who, you have to be able to justify your decisions. So if I have a Jupiter and Leo student, I can say, well, this person enjoys being on the stage, whereas the Jupiter and Virgo student, I don't use those words because I can, but those Jupiter and Virgo students can help that Jupiter and Leo learner slow down and actually hone in on making something better. Mm-hmm. So that use the language without using astrology words.
Yes, of course. And that is how I do consultations. I don't use jargon in consultations. My mentor and good friend was Noel Till, and he was a taskmaster at communicate without jargon. And you have to do that in the classroom, and it becomes very effective. But going back to Jupiter and Virgo versus Jupiter and Leo, the other thing that stands out is as Jupiter and Leo will want more attention, will want to stand out, the Jupiter and Virgo would be just fine saying, that's okay. I don't need to. I want to be right. I want to be correct and efficient, but you can have the light and I'll stand here and I'll get the problem right while you get the applause. There's that dynamic too that can stand out, but it's understanding it, that it's okay for them to be who they are.
And you can also watch out for the master servant thing that goes on, and helping the Virgos actually stand up to those Leos and say, I'm not going to be your slave. I'm going to, I'm my own person, and you're going to do your homework and I'm not going to do it for you. So it's just being aware of that those dynamics that can really help a teacher make sure that the opportunities, the Jupiter word, for learning are there for the learner.
Yes, and I would also think with any of the Jupiter signs in the fire element, so Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, the other thing you could capitalize on as a teacher is understanding they want to be a leader. They want to have some leadership role. And you want to be able to role model positive leadership and let them see it so that they can step into it and have some of that opportunity. You take someone with a Jupiter in Pisces, a Jupiter in Cancer, they're not going to necessarily want that kind of leadership role. They're going to want to blend and create harmony and nurturing and comfort. It's a completely different dynamic. So if you put, I think, a Jupiter and Pisces person in the spotlight, it's going to be a very different reaction than a Jupiter and Leo who goes, bring it on, make it brighter, turn it on, that sort of dynamic too.
And with teachers, especially in secondary school, where you're changing age groups. So I could be teaching year 7 in the first hour and then go to teaching year 11, which are 15, 16-year-olds. In the next lesson. So if I understand the Jupiter sign, I can sort of change gears. And a lot of people only understand sun signs in astrology. And when I was banned from using astrology in the classroom, I mean, it's a very good way to ensure that I'm going to do it, is to ban me. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to experiment with sun signs to sort of see if it works. And I do think that sun signs have value. I'm not saying they don't. So what I did was I put the class according to elements, and I had all my sun in fire signs in one row, all my suns in earth signs in the next row, all my suns in air signs in the next, and all my suns in water signs in the next row. This to see what would happen, and what happened. The fire signs took over. That's Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius completely took over.
Yes.
And the air signs, that's Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, were shouting over the heads of the earth signs, feeding into that energy. And the poor earth signs kind of sat there in silent shock. And the water signs started, hugging themselves and rocking to self-soothe in all the chaos. And that to me showed me that, okay, there is something in the sun signs, but if we're going to make it practical, we've got to make it easy on the teacher, because I could have 480 students over a 2-week rolling rota. So I can't remember everyone's star sign, sun sign. So, but I can remember their Jupiter sign, and I could probably tell their Jupiter signs just by looking at how big they are.
Yes.
So that, for me, the Jupiter signs made things far more practical too.
Yes. Very well said. And isn't it fascinating? Before we go too far, let me just share a story. My children went to Montessori. I have 2 kids. And so we put them in Montessori at age 3. My son stayed there till he was in 4th grade in the US system. My daughter stayed until 6th grade, at which point we decided to shift them to the more traditional approach in education. But they had been in these small, intimate Montessori rooms, and we didn't want them in public school because it was a massive school. So that would have been too much of a change. So we put them in a private school. And smaller classes, the whole class would have been maybe 75 kids per grade. What that did was allowed me to get to know practically every kid in the school. All the teachers knew every kid's name. It was much more intimate. So my son, born in 1994, was born when Uranus, Neptune were conjunct in Capricorn, and he has Saturn in Pisces. Okay. So these kids who are approaching their first Saturn return, born in 94. That's a very dynamic configuration. My daughter was born in 91. And so she has Neptune, Uranus conjunct in Capricorn with Saturn in Aquarius. So Saturn in Aquarius in mutual reception with Uranus for my daughter, Saturn in Pisces in mutual reception for my son. Fascinating group energy that was so different. And they are only 2.5 years apart. When it came time in high school to start doing the college applications and the essays and the research for college, what was nice about this private school is we had direct contact with the college counselor. And, they worked intimately with the kids. And so for my daughter's group with Saturn in Aquarius, he said they were amazing. They were on time. They were in my office all the time chattering. They wanted all the information. They wanted to research everything. We had meeting after meeting after meeting. They were just amazing. I didn't have to poke and prod any of them to get their college applications in time. Now, contrast that. You probably already know what I'm going to say about my son's group who had Saturn in Pisces, right? Because I went and I made sure I interviewed this college counselor. I said, tell me the difference between these two groups of kids. And he just rolled his eyes and he said, oh my God, the group with Saturn and Pisces, they were space cadets. It was like herding cats. They just wanted to create and flow. I could never get them to appointments. They were all late in their college essays. He said it was so totally different. They could care less about meetings. He goes, they were the nicest, most creative kids I ever met. But, try to get them organized and do what they're supposed to do is an entirely different story. And so here you go with the Saturn signs being different, born in a powerful generational planetary year. And light bulbs were going off in my head as an astrologer saying, oh, tell me more, tell me more. So I find what you are saying absolutely fascinating because I've kept up with my children's friends. I continue to do consultations for them now that they are in their late 20s and early 30s. And I see these patterns continuing.
I taught that year group. Not only did I teach them, they were actually, I was in a managerial role. We call it head of year, which kind of means I was in charge of all the homerooms of the same year group. So I had all the pastoral care. And because I had an understanding of them through my own Saturn, which was the same sign, I understood them a lot more than I think than another person born in a different year. And I was able to spend more time getting them to use their imagination in a constructive way, helping them to organize themselves because I recognized all these things in me. And I really am the kind of teacher who could turn her back for 10 seconds, turn around, and my classroom is a mess. It was always a struggle for me to be organized. But when I was a head of year, talking to my kids about being organized, making sure you use your diary properly, it came from the heart. And them being the intuitive people that they are, they understood. Here is an adult talking to me from experience who is giving me advice that I'm going to use for the rest of my life. And this is the importance of understanding Jupiter and Saturn too, because of the brain development that goes on between the ages of 11 to 15, between the Jupiter return and the first Saturn opposition. I call that the adolescent, astrological adolescence. And we fail, the educational system fails our children because we focus more on the exam years, the older children, and we don't realize that all this brain development going on in the younger adolescents is the door of opportunity. We know that if we have a child who has been neglected or his brain has not developed because they haven't been stimulated enough, we know that we can use this opportunity to help that brain catch up with its peers. But if we aren't aware of the pastoral problems around this child, that's a missed opportunity. And Absolutely. That child will always remain behind his peers and never recover. And so we're not quite there yet in the educational system. I understand it because, I understand astrology, but, we have so much work to do around that, about recognizing that the younger adolescents need just as much attention as the exam years.
Yeah, so let's explain a pattern that is fascinating related to what you just said. But first, let's go back and say, in the United States at age 6, a lot of the kids are starting kindergarten. And age 6 is when Jupiter is opposite Jupiter in the natal chart. So it's halfway through the cycle around the horoscope. Okay. And that's a big deal to start kindergarten or preschool or go away from mom and be in that setting. At age 7, when in the United States, most kids are in first grade, in those beginning years, we have Saturn squaring Saturn. So here we have two very, very important points separating from mom a little bit, establishing some independence and getting out there. Then the period you're talking about, 11 to 14, 15 years old, at age 12, give or take, we have Jupiter returning back to its natal position and puberty begins, growth spurts happen, all this wiring comes alive. And then at age 14, Saturn is opposite the natal position. So these are key marker points for development. And that Saturn opposition with puberty, oh boy, I remember my daughter going through that. My daughter, who is a sweet, wonderful, beautiful, beautiful young lady. And I loved her so deeply. And that's the stage where they roll their eyes at mom. They can't stand mom. It's just so harsh. And you just have to remember this is supposed to happen. Saturn opposite Saturn. They are individuating. They are pushing for their own identity and they take it out on mom, obviously. But there you are in the classroom with this beautiful opportunity. Everything is sparkling in their natal chart, and it does require care. It requires special handling and awareness. Jupiter conjunct Jupiter, Saturn opposite Saturn, age 12, age 14. And it's not that we're isolating one age. It's a wave of development, 4 or 5 year period where everything's percolating, right? Just growing like crazy.
Yeah, and what an professional astrologer can do is they can help parents pinpoint the times, because the time of astrological adolescence can vary individual to individual based on, the condition of Jupiter or Saturn in the natal chart. Jupiter could be retrograde. It could actually return 3 times to its natal position. And same with Saturn could have its opposition up to 3 times, which we know that transits that happen more than once actually extend the lifetime of that transit. So an example that I use when I'm doing my lectures is I'll talk about Leonardo DiCaprio, Drew Barrymore, and Angelina Jolie. And they were born in the academic year in that order. But Leo had the longest astrological adolescence. So he had time to get used to what was the changes that were going around him. Whereas Anna Jolie, she was the youngest, but actually the most mature because she got through the adolescence period of time faster than the other two. So an astrologer can help a parent identify this kind of phenomenon and can help support the parent to support the child.
Yeah, because so many parents, and I find this quite frequently, parents are projecting what they want to accomplish or what they didn't accomplish onto their child. And then it's this incredible pressure. As a matter of fact, I did a series of lectures for the Empowered Astrology Conference, which is my conference. And I was very proud of these lectures. It was 2 or 3. Boy, it's amazing. I can't remember that, but it was about Saturn and authority. And what I did was I talked about the generational parental modeling through the ages. And I talked about where Pluto was, but how parents showed authority and discipline and how that imprinted on the kid and then how they carry that forward. And when you have people who are about my age, I was a latchkey kid, which means I had complete freedom. So it's no wonder I identify with a Maverick, right? No guidance, complete freedom, go fend for yourself. I believe in you. Off you go, that sort of thing.
I think in a classroom, what teachers experience is a parent's anger at their own educational experience, and they're taking it out on the teachers. Because, when I was a kid at school, if I got in trouble at school, I'd be in trouble at home. Not that I ever got in trouble at school. I was always pretty good at school. But nowadays, parents can be very dismissive of teachers. or they can, really come down quite hard on teachers if they discipline the child at school.
Yeah.
So it's a very odd thing. But what I find with astrology is, we can use that to help support the parents, because parenting is hard. It's a tough responsibility, and parents will often say children don't come with a owner's manual. But as an astrologer, I'm going to say, well, they do.
Yes, they do. Call me for a consultation. I'll tell you. Exactly. I mean, that is the best benefit a parent can get, is to have a good astrologer mindfully interpret their child's chart. And when I do it, I look at the parent's chart and the child's chart side by side, and I'll get the siblings too, because you want to see the entire mix. And the objective is to help the parents understand how that child needs to be, so that the parent is not looking through their eyes, through their needs, and projecting that and expecting the child to be just like them. Take, for example, you have a parent with Saturn in Capricorn and maybe Jupiter in a high achieving sign, whatever that may happen to be, Capricorn or Virgo or Taurus, steadiness, a practicality, who has a child with totally different dynamic, who needs to do things. Maybe they're a maverick. I mean, maybe if you have a child who's a maverick who says, I need to question authority, I need to do things my own way, I need to creatively work around rules. And if you have a parent who has that rule-based orientation in their horoscope, that Capricorn energy or a strong Taurus energy, whatever it may happen to be, you have to explain to those parents, your child has these needs, and see them through a different lens than your own needs. Yeah.
And parents could have two different Saturn signs. So I think astrology can help parents tackle issues. I do parent preparation classes to help parents be aware that, hey, this is where your challenges are going to be, and this is how you need to talk to each other to help avoid severe conflict when the child reaches those critical stages. So I think it's very important to do family astrology and talk about things before they actually happen. And I very much, really admire my clients who come to me before they actually become parents to see what potential problems might be.
You're teaching a range of ages right now, so you're getting the experience of many different Saturn signs and Jupiter signs, but you're obviously probably working with some Saturn in Leo, which they'd be about 14 years old right now. Yeah. I bet that's fascinating.
Yeah, with the Saturn in Leo. So just to give you some famous examples, Elton John has a Saturn in Leo. And, he was somebody, he was very touchy about his appearance. His hair, he'd started losing his hair at a young age. Look at everything he did to try to hide that fact that he was losing hair. And not just that Saturn Leos are going to have that problem, but I'm just saying that he had to create a different persona to deal with the stage. And he, if you watch Rocket Man, he kind of lost himself, and had to become involved in all sorts of things that would allow him to pretend that the real Elton John could be hidden away. To let this persona come out. So yeah, Saturn in Leo is very fascinating, because it is to do with the ego, learning how to control and discipline that ego without necessarily overpowering it and keeping it hidden.
I have a theory about Saturn in the horoscope from a spiritual perspective, and that is, it seems to me, and this is going to be based on the fact that I believe in reincarnation and past life as a theory. Maybe not everybody does, but I'll present it in this way. It seems to me Saturn in the natal horoscope is suggesting something we want to get right. The sign in which we find Saturn says, as a soul, I want to get that energy right. It seems to me also that Saturn sign may have been presented in the shadow side in other lifetimes. So for example, you find somebody with Saturn in Aries, perhaps that child or person with Saturn in Aries has observed the shadow side of Aries before, which would be maybe selfish, self-centered, overly aggressive, overly pushy, that dynamic of Aries going to the extreme shadow side. And so it seems to me if you incarnate and you have Saturn in that sign, your soul is saying, I want to get it right. I want to avoid going to the shadow, and I want to try to do it at the higher level. We may or may not achieve that, but there is the desire to try to get it right, the pressure of it. And I also find that people are often very triggered by the shadow manifestation of their Saturn sign.
And I was also going to say, Saturn wants to be worked. So you'll find yourself in situations where you have to practice your Saturn in Sagittarius. Yes. And the more you understand it, the more work you put into understanding it. You can't call Saturn return easy, but the more that you can get out of it when your time comes.
And so for those of you who don't know, the Saturn return, probably most of you know this, but if you don't, Saturn return is at 29, right around 29 years old. And that's when you grow up and you pick your path. And it happens again at 58, which is another higher level of polishing. So that period, which is a half of a Saturn cycle at 14, becomes essential, because then 14 years later, when Saturn comes to return, you're taking what happened at 14 to the next level.
Yep.
Stages of development.
Perfect. Yep. Absolutely. And you're going to find repeated themes that come up that have to be dealt with. And if you can understand that cycle and how it works, you can work with it. Mm-hmm. And things don't have to be a totally miserable experience, because you see the job that has to be done to get that.
But I can't applaud you enough in my mind for the fact that you're actually in the trenches with the kids in the classroom, applying these techniques mindfully, being the maverick and paving a new way, and probably sharing this with other people, not necessarily using astrological terms in the classroom, but finding a way to hopefully teach and train and open this up. So, I look forward maybe 5, 10, 15 years, and it would be just the most beautiful thing if teachers would open their mind, if the school systems might appreciate this and bring this in.
We are recognizing that there are all different kinds of learners. I'm seeing more cases of diagnosed autism spectrum, for example. And, we're seeing that, but year fives, they would be 9, 10-year-olds. They are identified as this difficult year group because they're not learning independent skills, or they haven't learned independent skills. We'd be teaching them how to learn independently, a couple of years ago in year 3. Well, that's when they were in school. So now we have this year 5 that are particularly needy. And, that's quite a challenge, because it's hard. You can't teach something when they've missed the whole entire year.
So you have to be creative in solving this problem and think outside the box.
Yes,
for sure. Mm-hmm. And then there are all the kids who are classified as ADHD. I do a lecture series on anxiety signatures in the horoscope. I'm going to be lecturing on that later this year. And what I look for is the wiring for powerful electricity flowing through the mind, or powerful sensitivity, which can go into overwhelm. So I'm looking for signatures that involve Uranus or Neptune in special considerations. I won't go into detail on that. But these ADHD kids are often highly Uranian, the sparkling electricity that is just shooting off in 25 different directions at one time. And they need to be taught in a different way. I can see it in the horoscope, and I can look at a child's chart and tell the parents, this is a kid who needs to move their body, discharge energy, make sure they get lots and lots and lots of exercise. They may be fidgety. They may bite their nails. They may tap their foot. It's going to be hard for them to sit behind a desk and be quiet. And it's not that they can't learn. It's just that style sucks for them.
Look at what good behavior is. Sitting down, being quiet, and doing your work. That hasn't changed for 150 years. That was the whole entire premise of the industrial age. We were preparing children to go to work in factories. Mm-hmm. And we still have the inheritance of that
value system
in modern educational system.
These innovative ideas are here. How do we change this stuck in cement system to embrace the maverick within all of us, right? And to nurture it.
I taught to a year 6 class, year 6, so 10, 11-year-olds. They were doing cooking classes. And so I was like Julia Child, today, here we go, and making all these stuff. And I think one of the things that the kids said was, okay, we're following a recipe, but it all seems to work out in the end, even though we're not being necessarily precise. So what they're learning is a life skill, cooking. They're learning that it's not just the women who have to do the cooking, and what a contribution it is. And so I'm very excited about this thing. It's something new in this borough that I live in, about children cooking in the classroom. And it's little things like that I think will transform the way we educate our children, and coming away from this idea that the teacher comes into the classroom and talks for 6 hours and gives work. And, we need to allow children to be more independent learners.
And experiential.
Yes.
My son lives in New Orleans, and they have a program down there because all the schools are charter schools. One of the programs they have is an organic garden as one of
Excellent.
the classes for the day. And the kids get to not only learn where food comes from, but they get to tend the plants, they get to watch things grow, they get to pick the produce, but they also learn science because they get to plant the seeds, watch the germination, understand temperature, the whole process. And then they get to eat the food, which the whole cycle, is experienced of understanding the process. So, and of course, maybe it's the fire potential within me. I have a strong fire dynamic, and I want to do it. Don't just talk to me. Let me go do it. Let me put my hands on it, touch it, feel it, experience it. Then I get it. I
did a planting by the moon.
Yes.
Science experiment with I believe they were year 5s. And that was such a lot of fun. Which seed is going to grow the best on a Libra moon, sidereal Libra, that is. Is it going to be the flower? Is it going to be the root? Is it going to be, which one is going to grow the best? So that was a lot of fun. But it's little things like that I think that, I'm so pleased that I've had the opportunity to bring into the classroom, because when they get to be in high school and they start hearing some moldy old professor or teacher talk about how astrology isn't real, they're going to think back to this lesson that they had about planting by the moon, and they're going to think, I remember Miss Teeds telling us about planting by the moon, and maybe not being so persuaded that astrology is just a load of rubbish that they've read in some magazine. So that's the direction I fight from too.
Good for you. Much appreciated. So again, my guest, Alex Trenoweth. She has written a book that I highly recommend you go buy, Growing Pains, Astrology in Adolescence. You will learn a lot. You don't have to be an astrologer to understand it. That's the beauty of that book. And if you are an astrologer, it just takes it deeper. It helps you to understand patterns and waves of development, and what an incredible service it is. So I appreciate that tremendously. And thank you so much for coming on. I would love to have you on again, and let's talk about more of astrology and child development, because this is a hot topic. People are hungry for it as we go into this new way of going through life.
I've been so busy with my astrology clients and so many different kinds of services for children.
Yes, me too. It seems like all I'm doing now are children's charts these days, because parents are waking up to the power of it.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. So thank you so much. We'll say bye for now until we have you on again.
Okay. See you. Thank you.